Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Nobu with Nobu, the All American Shaman. Nobu, how are you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me, brother.
Yeah, great to be back. Today, we're going to be exploring light as medicine. So, light comes in all different forms in our daily life, light bulbs, the screens in front of us, and of course, the OG, the sun.
Mhm.
So, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about the different impacts and how light can be seen as medicine in your practice.
Yes. So, as I touched on before, we are what we eat and we consume through all the different gates of the body, whether that be what we consume through our mouth in terms of food and water, what we listen to in terms of thoughts and ideas and sounds and frequencies. Also, what goes in through our eyes is, equally important. So whether we are exposing ourselves to the natural coherent frequencies of the sun directly to our eyeballs, or if we're getting that natural medicine filtered out through UV blocking sunglasses or auto glass and houses, we are depriving ourselves of those natural frequencies of sunlight. And then on the other end of the spectrum, a lot of human beings are getting exposed to non-native forms, not unnatural, such as blue light from screens. Um, yeah, all the screens. I mean, LED lights, fluorescent lights, these are all toxic to some capacity.
Right. And maybe just it was popping up in my mind as you were speaking, and maybe it kind of cuts to the chase a little bit quickly and skips some steps. But I saw it, I think, at first on like an Instagram post of this like old drawing, kind of in like the Indian, like in Hindu style, of like how yoga teaches that sunlight is kind of like a healing energy coming into your eyeballs. And then the commenter said, with sunglasses, we may be causing cancer to ourselves because we're blocking out this helpful light, and the sun hitting your eyes is then what activates in the rest of your skin the ability to
Hmm.
absorb properly and deal with those UV rays. So if you're blocking that reception into your eyeball, then you won't put up your defenses or your absorption, so to speak. And so thus, like, wearing sunglasses is actually really harmful. Have you thought about that or come across that as well?
I'm glad you mentioned that because that is absolutely spot on. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you the exact mechanism at play, but yes, it's a two-part equation with sunlight. It's the eyes and the skin. So yes, if the eyes aren't also receiving the same data, the same stimulus of sunlight, then there's a missing part of the equation. The body's unable to metabolize vitamin D and other, aspects of that energy properly. You it's very disconcerting, right? Because again, the human organism has spent a long time on this planet, receiving, okay, when we receive light through the eyes, we're also receiving the skin and vice versa. Whereas in an unnatural context of reversing that, the body is like, well, what do we do? We can see in nature of what happens when we put animals in similar conditions that simulate what the natural one would be, right? If we put uh, a toad underground, in darkness, like a bufo, for example, it's going to be more likely to go into a hibernating state. And then this also ties into morphic fields as well of how nature has memory and patterns. So when we stimulate on the microcosm of, light entering our eyes at night, right, that throws off our circadian rhythm. And then we have issues of depression and, people not sleeping properly and all other sorts of things. But yes, um, just while I have it right out in front of me, these candles emit IR light, infrared. So UV is ultraviolet, on that further right end of this frequency in terms of the chakras, it'd be more towards the crown chakra, whereas infrared is lower, closer to heat, thermal energy. Like pit vipers, for example, can see the heat spectrum, and this is, just like fire. It or an infrared sauna, it permeates the body at a deeper level. So, not to say that synthetic light can't be used for beneficial ways, but it has to be properly used, right? So,
Yeah,
for
and like
example,
kind of
the
known ahead of time, like what the intention is, right?
mhm. Yes, for example, the UV light of the tanning bed, if someone's just exposing them to that without proper awareness, uh, again, and also timing of the day, right? Tanning in the morning is going to be vastly more congruent with your natural biology than tanning in the evening. Um,
Makes sense.
Also, exposing oneself to infrared heat radiation fire at night is, albeit not natural, it is, I think, the most conducive way for our survival as well. Um, and then also, furthermore, fluorescent versus incandescent, because fluorescent lights emit UV and blue light, and they rob our bodies of melanin, which we produce from natural sunlight, and whereas incandescent lights emit IR and also again heat, right? You can touch a fluorescent light and you won't get burnt, but you can't touch an incandescent light without getting burnt because it also gives off again that IR spectrum, which permeates the body, which again science has established to be true. It's why IR saunas are a thing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so many different things we can dive into, but like on the fluorescent lights, I remember seeing a video of like classrooms, and obviously most of the classrooms across America have those bar fluorescent bulbs, and I mean, you can just feel the harshness of them when you walk into a room, like your eyes kind of hurt, and then I guess they have like a refresh rate where it's like not actually like a constant stream of light, like they kind of
Mm-hmm.
flicker at this very high frequency that like your eyeballs can't even really pick up on, but like your subconscious can. So it makes people freak out. And I think there was
Mm-hmm.
some studies done on like, whether ADHD and more of these like attention deficit disorders are more of just a result of the body's almost like freaking out due to this crazy type of light that's being blasted into kids' faces when they're sitting there for like 6 hours a day. So I thought that was kind of fascinating of like something that just goes without question of like, oh, these are just the lights that we use, but they may be having physiological impacts that are incredibly detrimental, especially day in and day out, year after year in a classroom setting.
Yes. Well, also, isn't it? It's not a coincidence, I think, that a lot of our parents, at least for your and my age group, at least, I don't know about you, my parents, or I heard people around my age group saying, it's that damn phone, or like you're spending all that time in front of the TV, like get outside, right? You know, there was a time
Yeah.
where our parents, and even again, if we talk to indigenous people, they know that technology is the cause for a lot of our problems and issues. You know, they don't have cancer in ancient ancient tribes or societies. Diet also plays a role in this, but again, the modern comforts are really poison sold as again an escape. It just gets us dig deeper into the hole.
Right. Yeah.
Mm.
These things that are sold as like cures for problems that don't exist. I mean, going back to the UV exposure, I mean, I just heard this today. My wife and I went to the dermatologist to get like a mole looked at, and she was saying, like, oh, like, know what your exposure is to the sun and the UV, and like that could cause issues. And like it just got me spinning in my own head of like, what are we really saying here right now? Like, is it UV exposure while you're wearing sunglasses, and thus like you don't have the defenses up, and then that's what caused it? I think it's just like been a blanket statement by the medical community that like sunlight is bad and thus you should never expose yourself, or if you do, expose yourself as little as possible and put sunblock on your skin and put sunglasses on. But like the more that I kind of dive into this stuff and like just think about it logically and evolutionarily, it's the exact opposite of what we're being told, really, is what you should be doing. Like, sunlight actually is good. And if you put these chemicals in the form of sunblock on your skin, you're probably going to have worse results at the end of it. I mean, I'm not saying that like if you're fair skinned or like white skinned and like you go out and burn like crazy, that's not going to hurt. Like obviously that is, but I think a lot of the misconceptions on like people wearing sunglasses, thinking that they're helping their body. Seemingly that's kind of the opposite of really what's happening. And maybe in your experience, kind of like where is that coming from the medical establishment? Like, why are they demonizing the sun?
If you want to make people dependent on you and we've spoken, you and I have spoken this a lot about the difference between leadership and love and empowering people versus making people dependent upon you and thus enslaved. Um,
Hmm.
you need to give them something to fear, right? And you need to make them weaker. So making people, when a disease starts spreading around, instead of putting the burden of responsibility on each individual to be accountable for their own immune system and ability to respond to the spirits in the air, right? Putting the responsibility on every other person. It's your fault I got sick. It's the sun's fault. It's nature's fault that I'm too weak to even go out in my natural environment. Whereas again, look at the rest of nature. Or again, furthermore, better off, look at individuals like Wim Hof, who have demonstrated the ability of the human body to perform in and thrive in adverse conditions. I think I know I'm sidetracking from the medical establishment, but I'll circle it back. Is you know Sherpas, people who are highly adapted to performing at high altitude, low oxygen, and in the cold. People nowadays would rather, again, pay or be provided for a quick fix, a band-aid for the symptom of why they're suffering, again, like sunscreen, than it is to take accountability for their own health, wellness, and sovereignty, right? Because telling someone, hey, the reason why you're burning out the sun is because your body's also inflamed, right? And this is also bringing impurities to the surface, like you're sweating like a pig or you're burning up because you're burning like a vampire. Well, let's look at your diet. Your diet's highly inflammatory and you're having a detox reaction. Um, not again,
Hmm.
not another thing to spiral off onto. I used to sunburn, especially my nose was the first thing always when I was carnivorous and omnivorous. But when I did my first juice fast, actually, I was outside in the sun for 6, 8 hours every day, and I didn't burn it all at all. Like I stopped burning. Um, some of this could also begin looking at the microcosm of like, well, watermelon is extremely high in lycopene, which is an antioxidant that's known to combat against UV stress. But still, again, I don't think it's any coincidence as well that plants contain the antioxidants within them to heal from any sort of sun damage. Whereas, to my knowledge, there's no compounds within flesh that help us to manage the radiation of the sun. I know I went off all
Yeah, I
over
like
the
that.
place there.
No, that was awesome. That the vampire burning in the sun really kind of made it click. And like you're saying, a sun is like detoxing us, kind of like for us. Like it's like the medicine is basically like burning out these impurities from our body, and like the sweat will then I imagine carry out some of the toxins from from the body through the skin, and just like the UV itself, I imagine, is able to kind of like burn off whether it's bacteria or viruses or things like that, like on a smaller level as well. I like that visual of it may feel painful, but like when you're throwing up because you ate some poison, like you would prefer to feel the pain of throwing up than the pain of dying from the poison. So it's like, maybe it's like a similar type of approach there. It's like, oh, like being out in the sun, yeah, I'm uncomfortable. Maybe there's a reason for that rather than just the surface level of the sun is hot and my skin is hot. It's like, okay, maybe look a little bit deeper as like why I'm having this reaction to the sun.
Yes, but
Very interesting.
that that goes down a route of extreme accountability, though, right? Which means being when one faces friction and adversity with nature. Again, I'm not talking about other human beings. I'm talking about nature with the sun or with the elements of the cold. Instead of being like, why, gosh darn it, like, why is the sun so hot today? Or why is it so cold out today? Understanding and stepping back out of the human ego and be like, okay, creation and God does not make any mistakes. So this isn't the issue. Maybe I need to look within myself and see what I'm doing or what patterns of behavior I'm exhibiting that are not in alignment with natural law, right? And that touches more into shamanism as well. Um, Interesting to note, talk about how pit vipers can see in the IR spectrum, and then roosters can see in the UV spectrum. They have trichromatic vision. So with all these different frequencies at play, they're there for a reason. So when we attempt to, as human beings, to cherry pick which ones we're going to be exposed to, you know, of course it's a recipe for disease. It's like when we take, a food and we just extract one compound from it, you know, that's not the intended state. Now we are running some more risks at things being thrown out of balance.
Kind of like with a supplement or a vitamin. It's like, oh, if you just have it in a little capsule form, it may not have the same effect as if you ate it within like a fruit, and then it has all these other compounds that you're ingesting with it, and they can kind of in concert with each other um, provide other benefits because there's like a mixture of other components and ingredients there that all work together to have an effect.
100%. Yes. It's more
Interesting.
holistic.
Yeah, and you can't have an episode of Light as Medicine without mentioning Dr. Jack Kruse, who I know both of us thoroughly enjoy his YouTube videos is where I seen him. I haven't seen him in
Mhm.
person yet, but fascinating. He was a neurosurgeon, and he was I guess just over the course of his entire career, like piecing together how light, water, and magnetism are really like the keys to health. And the way that he described it, I believe when it was talking on Rick Rubin's podcast to Andrew Huberman, just like, think about the sun is sending these electrons and then they hit your eyeball. And then if you're grounded, bare feet on the grass, then it's like this kind of like perfect continuous loop. And the human system is designed to be that way, and like that's maybe all animals really that have eyes and feet as like this kind of closed circuit, and that's what keeps our electric systems in our body functioning properly. And again, it's just like it's so simple, which I think is maybe why it's so easy to dismiss as like, oh, I'm having all of these problems, there must be something really wrong with me that's like super complicated because hey, like I'm a really special dude, and like there's got to be something mysterious going on because I haven't figured this out. But like it's like, oh, just go out in the sun and be barefoot and eat some good food, and like overall you'll probably regulate over time. But yeah, I think like you're saying, if you kind of create these external boogeymen, then you're maybe able to sell more products and more services and more visits to the doctor's office and kind of keep that customer rolling along. Whereas, if you went to the doctor and they said, okay, just get some more sunlight and eat some more food and walk around in the grass, like that's not a very lucrative customer for that profession. So I can see why the incentives are not necessarily aligned there. Um, but yeah, anything else you wanted to add on like kind of that more evolutionary path as far as like the light and grounding cycle?
I would encourage anyone listening to ask themselves honestly, would you do you think it's more realistic that your environment and the world around you is going to make itself softer or less harsh or change because you are weak or sick? Or do you think it's more plausible and mature for you to take accountability for your health and to make the required changes to be in alignment with nature? All right. That's that's
Right.
that's a question for everyone to
Yeah.
ask
Yeah. No,
themselves. It's like accountability.
right. And like that nature kind of versus maybe like human constructs thing too. Is I think maybe it's like a pendulum that's kind of swung like in the past to maybe more holistic practices were front and center, and then as like medical schools and like this whole industry and complex arose, then it was kind of like advertised as being the way of the future, and like this is how we advance and this is how we get better as a species. Like forget all of this natural healing stuff. We invented something better. But now I think that the evidence is in, and I know myself, like seeing the generation of my grandparents and my parents, and the bad results that they are getting, being dependent on the medical system, is why I first reached out to people like you, Nobu, on the shamanistic side, being like, okay, maybe there are some answers that the medical system cannot provide, that can only be provided through more of a holistic and natural approach. So maybe you could talk about that with your experience and the folks that you work with on maybe their experience with the traditional medical industry, and why they made the choice to start working with you.
It's funny you say that because some of my former coaching clients have been a doctor, a surgeon, one currently is a professor of pharmacology. Uh, and
Hmm.
some common themes in terms of actually, yeah, all three of them in the modern medicine world were telling them to go out and get into nature, get time barefoot on the ground, um, get that sunlight. And people too in the modern medicine world are living in these sanitary environments filled with that UV light, the synthetic light, electromagnetic frequencies bombarding them all day, and they're getting more and more sick. Um, the prescription, and we touched on this in your podcast about grounding, better water, time in nature, and eating, food as medicine. If if people realize that less is generally going to be more, they'll solve a lot of their issues.
Yeah. Is there like less is more, got me thinking like how much time to spend in the sun? Like is there like a minimum to get some benefits? Is there a maximum where you're starting to maybe do more harm than good? Like what's your typical recommendation when you're telling folks to get out there and get some sun?
When I'm working with clients, it's always building off things really baby steps. Because even just getting someone to get out in the sun for 5 minutes might be hard for them. Some people are really chronically inside. So starting off really small, right? Um, in the morning is ideal. Like Jack Cruz says, facing the east, sun in the morning, barefoot in the ground is ideal. But I would encourage each person to slowly build themselves up. If you're getting yourself to the point of burning, you're doing too much. All right. You need to, your body will recover, and there's plenty of foods. Again, any food, fruit or vegetable that's high in lycopene is going to be your best friend in terms of recovering from that UV damage. And in fact, I personally would argue that that UV damage is necessary to the growth and resilience of a human body, right? Just as one needs to be exposed to different pathogens to develop an immunity, right? We need to have stress, oxidative stress on the entire system in order to be healthy, truly healthy, not this false
Mm.
sense of security that a bunch of protective measures give us the illusion of health. That's not really health. That's bubble boy.
Right? Yeah, it's like the paradox, right? Like in order to be comfortable, you must put yourself in uncomfortable situations, whether that be like personal goals, professional career type things, or just like your overall health and physiological well-being. If you try to create an environment that's free of all challenge, then you're going to be very weak and sick, most likely. So you need to find the stressors out there that make you stronger, whether that be working out, or like you're saying, going out into the sun and having that, um, those energies and those frequencies hitting you. You mentioned it to me before we started recording, but on your own personal practice, maybe you can talk about, for those folks that live in darker climates and areas, using tanning and things like that.
Yes, I utilize Planet Fitness tanning every other day. and I go for max time because I'm fairly dark. I keep a tan all year round because I stay up on that discipline. Um, just make sure that you are also getting the other balance of frequencies. So if you're getting all this UV light on the high end of the spectrum, ultraviolet towards purple of the rainbow, make sure you are also getting on the other end of the frequency IR, which that's why I have candles out also all the time as well. You're getting that red light as well. So you're getting as much of the full palette as possible. There's also, I know Amazon, other sites sell sunlight synthetic lamps. And if you're really raking, though, you can get vitamin D light bulbs as well. But obviously, again, I would say going tanning is your most cost effective bang for your buck if you're living in the Pacific Northwest or an otherwise dark environment. And then, not to go too much into this, but as you and I have also learned through Jack Cruz, is that cold exposure, and I think this also really shows the beauty of the human body and spirit, God, creator, what have you, is that if you are not living in an environment that is, you know, near the equator or tropical or filled with sunlight, the other way for you to fulfill that same process is inversed. It goes from the inside out with, extreme cold exposure. It stimulates that production of UV light inside the body, generating it outwards. So I think it's really cool that even if you are in a frigid, cold environment, that you still have a way of activating the same mitochondrial pathways in the human organism.
Yeah, yeah, that was something that blew my mind on the podcast with Dr. Cruz when he was saying, like, basically as an adaptation for, when humans started to live in these areas at higher latitudes, like closer to the poles, you get these, the winter months are very dark and long stretches without the sun, so the body, yeah, and I don't know exactly how the mechanisms of it. I'm sure you could dive more into his research on it, but the body produces the light that then kind of keeps all the electrical systems functioning properly. Like you become your own little mini sun on the inside to like tan your insides on your own. So if you don't have the sun, then being in that cold exposure will kind of substitute for it. And yeah, just in general, like you're mentioning, there's different light bulbs and different frequencies and fire and candles and things like that. But the full spectrum, the sun itself will give you all of the frequencies and all of the different degrees that you need. So if that's your number one choice, and it's
Mm-hmm.
for free outside your door at any time you need it. But like you're saying, if if you're having a lot of cloudy days or living in um, areas closer to the poles where you have long winters of very dark nights, and Alaska, there's like almost 24 hours of darkness, then there are some other substitutes that you can seek out to help fill some of those gaps between when you're actually able to get direct sun exposure. I know the blue light has come up a lot as well, and he's mentioned having like blue light filters on your glasses themselves, like kind of these like orange things. Could you talk about maybe the rationale behind trying to filter out blue light spectrum coming from screens?
Yes. So part of the word melanin, again, the melanin that is produced in the body when it is exposed to sunlight, and or again, other foods as well, like chaga, chaga mushrooms high in melanin. Melanin gets converted into melatonin, which again we know is important for our sleep cycle. And then melatonin is also converted into DMT, which is dimethyltryptamine, which is a potent psychoactive substance, which is endogenous to the human body. But we'll get more on that in the future. But the reason why it's important to shield one's eyes against blue light is that when every time we're exposing our eyes to blue light and also our skin, it's robbing the body's stores of melanin. So our own ability to keep a tan, to keep the internal UV generator sunlight going on, is getting robbed, getting destroyed. So it's extremely debilitating. Again, all those non-native frequencies.
It's like depleting. So like the longer you stare at a
Hmm.
screen, like it's almost like depleting your body of these things.
It is. It is. So that's also why, you going out into the sunlight, for an hour a day is great. But if you're still, again, we talked about in the first, you know, removing all the negative things. Doesn't matter if you're taking all the supplements in the world and you have fluoride in your water still. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're
Mm.
getting an hour of sunlight every day, but you're still staring at a screen for 8 hours for your job under fluorescent lights, and then you go home and you stare at a screen to watch Netflix for 4 hours. You're getting this much medicine and then this much poison, and it's completely does the math doesn't work out.
Yeah, that pains me because I have that situation. Yeah, I work in a corporate desk job staring at a computer screen under fluorescent lights, and it sucks, that environment. Like it's not what I would prefer to have be the case. So thinking toward the future and how to solve more of these things. I know we've seen computers that are designed specifically to not emit blue lights, but maybe any other types of approaches that folks can take if they are working in more of that desk job office setting.
So as you already said, the blue light blocking glasses, and then also as far as EMF in general, and also the grounding element, grounding mats, which there's several providers. If you just search grounding mat or earthing mat, but essentially what that's going to do is going to plug into the grounding port, allow electrons to discharge out your feet or whatever you're sitting on, so that way you're not having to harbor as much of the load of all this non-native radiation as possible. And then also Haven gear, which in my hat is by Haven, HAVN, and it's silver lined gear, which protects against not EMF in the context we've talking about this show as far as light, but 5G, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, because those forms of frequency also have the same exact effect as the blue light does, of where it robs your body of melanin. Because again, which you and I talked about this before we started recording the show, in Chernobyl, and anyone can look this up, I encourage you to. In Chernobyl, they've found over the years since the incident that the species that have survived and thrived still after all these years since the incident are higher in melanin, darker skin toned spiders, birds, and wolves. The lighter skinned ones do not live there anymore. They cannot tolerate the radiation. So I would venture to say that when there's more scientific studies on this in the future, because there will be, uh, maybe that'll be one of our future endeavors. But like, for example, someone who's African American is going to have a greater ability to withstand, you know, these problems because they have a higher melanin, higher capacity for radiation. And it's not just sunlight. It's all forms of radiation. Melanin really is that missing piece.
Fascinating. Yeah, that is pretty wild with the nuclear fallout of Chernobyl, and then like what species are still able to remain there and which ones either died or just left the area. That is super fascinating. Um, yeah, maybe we'll make a field trip one of these days with the with the podcast, bring the audience along for the ride.
I would love that.
Um, so you mentioned the clothing that kind of has the ability to kind of block some of those EMFs as well, and maybe we can do an episode at a future time on Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and 5G, because I think there's probably enough to dive into there on its own. But just on sun and light more specifically, anything else we wanted to touch on in this episode?
No, just make sure that again you're being very conscious of what you allow into your body. You just when you reframe it in this context of input equals output, right? You know, you the person watching, listening right now, it's you don't feed yourself or your children garbage food. I hope you don't feed them garbage ideas and thought forms. And Same thing as, don't feed them and yourself garbage energy. You know, love yourself.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. Get outside. Take off the old UV blocking glasses to allow the beautiful rays of the sun to penetrate and activate some magic inside you and absorb the healing energy. So thank you again, Nobu, for taking the time to talk us through this. And thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.